Good to go. Excellent. Hey, it's Drake Briggs with Obsidian Wisdom. Thankful for another Retirement Readiness Thursday. The Wi-Fi and everything was trying to keep me out, but I was like, look, all I know is to restart things. So I restarted my Wi-Fi, I restarted my computer, and I'm thankful that everything's working. Today, we're going to have a case study with nonprofits. So if you work in like a nonprofit or the federal government in general, then sometimes you have positions that offer a pension. The one we're going to focus on today in this nonprofit, the two of them do not have a pension. And we'll go through whether they can reach their retirement goals of retiring at, I think it was 63, with about $210,000 that they had saved up for their retirement. They had a 5% that they were putting in from their check, and they had a 5% match. And so in that, we will go over whether or not that is something that you can do to retire. The big thing that we want to talk about is if we have like 200,000 of a modest amount, there are a couple of choices we could make to make sure that we retire. This one for them, they love the work that they did at the nonprofit. And you already know there's really three levers that we have. Normally it's I can put more money in, I can wait and work a little bit longer, like I can work the time out, or I can lower my lifestyle. Those are normally the three levers that we can use to see if we can achieve what our retirement goals are. And so we'll go over everything from paying the bills to when they retire to having the extra expenses, and then how that helped them to be able to decide what made the most sense. So on that note, I will share my screen and I'll add you the case study. So what you can see here is when it comes to the question, hey, we are 57 and 53, can we retire at 63 from our nonprofit work? And in this case, they were not. From the money that they had in, they didn't have a pension. They had the 5% that they were investing with a 5% match, which is very nice. And a lot of times when you're in nonprofit work, you have, generally speaking, right, like nonprofit, different federal jobs, the salary is going to normally be a little bit lower because it's more mission driven, right? Just high level, generally speaking. And then it becomes a question of where are the trade-offs? So sometimes I have a better quality of life when I'm still working. So I see a lot of time when we work in nonprofits and government jobs, people work longer than you'll see in typical other jobs. So I'll give you an extreme example to make the point very crystal clear. When I worked at Deutsche Bank, I worked in investment banking, and I was a financial analyst on for one of the tables, like worked on one of the desks. So we would go through all the trades, we would see what the profits and loss are, and then we would send them a report each morning before the traders got to work. The traders, the work that they did, it was not uncommon for them to retire at like 40 because the demands of that job, we're talking about waking up at 5 in the morning, reading all the papers, seeing what happened in the markets in London and the markets in Asia, and then you're getting ready to handle your trades of the day, talking about the ebbs and the flows and all of that. It was not uncommon for someone to just be essentially burnt out. Either they had all the money that they needed and they were just like, I don't like it, or the job was very stressful, or they lost a bunch of money and were fired. Whatever the reason is, a trader doesn't necessarily work that long in the industry. There are exceptions as always, but generally speaking, and you'll find that if you did professional athletes, sort of the same idea, right? Like if I'm 40, more times than not, you're going to be retired. The average professional athlete's life is about 3 years, right? About 3 years and then they retire. But even if I'm in the exception, it still wouldn't be much longer than 40. Well, if you're in the nonprofit sector, it is not uncommon for someone to be working at 70 because of the demands of the work that they are doing. It is not as demanding. The trade-off, and the reason that normally if we work in nonprofit, it makes more sense to focus on the length of time is because normally we're paid a little bit less. So if you work in, like police, firefighter, teachers, and then a lot of nonprofit work, you are getting paid less than your counterpart, right? Like think of it as a public defender versus someone who has like a high profile law firm. High profile law firm, you're going to make more money, yes, but you're going to work a lot more hours and it's going to be a lot more demanding, right? Just high level, right? There's exceptions. If you're working as a public defender, it is a demanding job, but when the demands, you can clock out and go home, right? Like you don't have the same level of demands. And so that is why from a lot of my clients that work in the nonprofit sector, where that relationship, generally speaking, is like, hey, you're not going to pay me as much. My retirement should be a little bit better, and then the demands of my daily work should be a little bit better. I pay the traders at Wall Street a lot more because I am very demanding of them. They are working 10, 20 hours every single day. They are grinding, so I pay them more. And then the question becomes, right, we're talking about government efficiency and things like that. can I give them the demands of a private sector employee, but the pay of a public sector employee? Economically speaking, the answer would be no, in my humble opinion, because the demands and what you pay is how you attract the people. If I'm working for a what were we saying? Like if I'm working for a nonprofit versus I'm working for literally a Wall Street firm, I know at the Wall Street firm that they are going to grind me into the dirt, but I'm going to make a ton of money. And if I work for a nonprofit that's a little bit more mission driven, I know that they're not going to pay me as much, but I also know that I have a better balance in my life. And so that is why a lot of the times, and I give you a little background, when you talk about nonprofits, normally speaking, you would need to work a little bit longer to be able to cover all of your bases. And so for this one, you'll see it's 80% probability of success. All we're basically saying is, hey, can we retire at 63? The answer is no. Like we cannot retire early at 63, but we could still retire at a reasonable amount of time. And I'll share with you what we ended up doing. So let's go through the case study first. So we'll go through the profile. So as far as the net worth, we have about 500,000 net worth, which is pretty good. We have $210,000 in our two 403Bs. We have another 35,000 and then another 75,000 in our Roth IRA. So that's your tax-free money. So life is pretty good when you look at that, and we feel very good about that. You can see that the mortgage, we have about 217,000, 210,000 left on the mortgage, and about 7,000 left on the car, and then the property is worth about $450,000. That's how we get our net worth. For their goals in retirement, this one they were concerned about long-term care, so we left it in there. As we mentioned, 7 out of 10 people, 65 and older, have a long-term care episode, and the cost is somewhere between $50,000 to $70,000 a year, and on average, it's about 3 years, right? And so we just are simply saying, when will that happen? We're going to say, hey, the last 2 years of your retirement, we're going to have someone come into your house and just help you a few days a week for a few hours a day. Last 2 years of retirement. We're saying that we're going to live to 90 in this plan. So 89 to 90, let's just say we'll need a little help. What does that look like? And so we'll put the amounts in, we take the national averages, and then it gets increased by inflation each year. So that's where that will be in the plan. For the healthcare costs, we just took the national average as well. So that'll be about $6,400 a year as far as what they would spend in retirement on healthcare, and then we increase that with inflation. They were talking about putting on a new roof. So this home improvement project, they're talking about putting on a new roof and a new HVAC. And so we said, what does that cost today? We said, they said roughly like 10,000 or so. And then we would increase that by the time they would do it. And we estimated that they would do it at 66 years of age. Nonprofit, they both work in nonprofit. So they wanted to be able to give to that nonprofit. They may volunteer as well in retirement, not in the same capacity, but just in a capacity. And so they said, we would like to give at least $1,000 to nonprofit every single year. We said, cool, no problem. And then they have a daughter that's having a wedding in like 3 years. And so they wanted to be able to give $10,000 towards the wedding. And so what we do is the same idea. We put the price in for today. We increase it by inflation. So that way we see what that value would be. Naturally, you could say, yeah, I'm going to give $10,000 whenever that is. Because right, they just know that they're going to get married. They've been dating for a while, and they feel very confident that they'll be married, and they would like to have the money set aside. And so that's where this goal came from. And so they would, if for something happened and the daughter didn't get married, they could give it to the daughter as a down payment for a home. They could say, we don't care about increasing by inflation. We're just giving $10,000, and that's all we're going to give. And then you don't have to worry about increasing by inflation. But that's how we had set it for them. And then as far as the vacation, we said about $6,000 every single year. And then they would take that trip together each year. The national average currently, if you wanted, I think it's about $700 a day for each person. So it would be like $1,400 a day for like a couple in most places. If you stay in the United States, naturally, it works a little bit better for you. So you can see their goal is to retire at 63. Their after expense and retirement life would be about $5,500 a month. And then that would set us up. So that's basically what the goals currently are. And then we'll add on to those as we go along, right? So that would get us set up. As far as their income, working in the nonprofit, they're making combined 170. The work that they do in the positions that they're at, right, as we mentioned, it's a little bit lower that you'll find in the nonprofit sector, but it's because they're usually offering some other balances. When you talk about the amount that they're contributing, it's 5,000 or 5% that each of them is contributing to the 403B because that's what the match is. And then they max out their Roth contributions and they take advantage of the fact that they're over 50. So they get the extra 1,000 that they can contribute. They have no investments in taxable accounts, just regular taxable accounts. Their current lifestyle is the 4,000 plus the mortgage. The mortgage is like 1,500, and the car payment is like 400. So their current lifestyle is somewhere closer to 6,000 a month when you add everything in together. Then you add the taxes and the maintenance on the home and things like that. So it's probably closer to like $6,800 a month that they actually spend. And then their plan is to pay off some of these bills and to get that amount lowered to the 5,500. So that's what their current goal is. And so if they're able to accomplish all that, we would say, right, rainbows and skittles, let's go. So when you're looking at the plan, we will discuss how close we actually came to being able to retire at 63, and we'll talk about what changes we made to make it work. And so we mentioned there's normally three levers that you have. You either put more in, you wait a little bit later, or you live a lower cost of living lifestyle. So those are normally going to be your three levers. So in this particular one, you can see that the plan has a setup where we're saying that there is the likelihood that they will run out of money somewhere in their late 80s. So we're really close with the current plan, retiring at 63. All we're saying with this, and that's the reason the number varies, all we're saying is running a Monte Carlo simulation means 1,000 different retirement scenarios. How many times do we actually make it to the end? And so the dark line is basically where we average everything together and say, this is probably what's going to happen. The darker blue that's kind of a little bit lighter around it, we're saying that that's probably half the time that's what's going to happen. And then there's a possibility that every single investment is gangbusters and you actually have millions of dollars left over and you have more money than you can spend. There is a possibility that every investment goes poorly and you literally run out of money in your early 60s, like right away. Those are less likely. So we're saying it's more likely that we right around 80 years of age, and the goal is to make it to 90. So that means that only 8% of the time we actually make it. And then we'll go through what changes we made to make this work. So in their current portfolio, you can see that they have basically all of their money in tax deferred. So we know that they'll be taxed as ordinary income. And then we had $75,000 that's set aside in a tax-free Roth. So that's also very nice. So that's a good situation to be in. When it comes to their investments, let me zoom in a little bit for you. When it comes to their investments, they actually were slightly a little bit more aggressive than you would expect someone that's planning on retiring in the next 5 years. So for them, we started making changes where we adjusted the aggressiveness. So we went slightly more moderate, still keeping up and outpacing inflation. As you know, I'm someone that really likes the three bucket strategy because it gives me the flexibility to invest my money in the stock market, but I don't have the risk that we generally have, which is if there's an inflation once every 10 years and I'm withdrawing money from these investments, if the market goes down, I'm locking in my losses because I'm selling low. And you'll be like, yeah, run out of money quicker, which is true. But if we have these other two buckets, we have our income bucket not tied to the market, we have our cash bucket not tied to anything. Well, now I might have enough time to spend from my cash bucket and to spend from my income bucket to allow my aggressive investments to recover from the market loss. That's the idea of the three buckets. I need to make sure that in my mind, I'm not going to touch that money for at least like a literal minimum 5 years. Right? If you give yourself at least 5 years, there's unlikely you have a recession that lasts that long. And so it does give you the comfort of saying, even if there is a recession, I can live off these other buckets. I can live off my cash, normally 1 to 2 years living expenses. That meant we needed to be a little bit more moderate allocation so that we can sell some of these and buy more cash. Right? And so that's basically what we ended up having to do for them. And that did work for them. So when you're looking at the plan, let's go through some of the things that we did to make it work, because that's what you care about. All right. So when it comes to the plan, the inflation adjusted, all we're saying is what you spend each year, we just increase it by inflation. So by 3% each year, that is very unlikely. That's going to be the most conservative, though, spending strategy, because the likelihood that you will spend the exact same amount every single year for your entire retirement life is unlikely. The idea that you're going to spend the same amount and increase it with inflation each year is equally unlikely. You may take less trips. You may eat out at more restaurants. You may, right, you're going to take some volunteering. You're going to give here. You're going to travel there, but maybe you don't want to travel as far. And you can do things local. And so as a result, we normally, for most people, we use the retirement spending smile. And all we're saying is that early in retirement, I spend a pretty good amount of my money. And then around the middle of retirement, I'm sort of chilling out a little bit. I get a little tired a little bit easier. So I'm just not interested in sleeping in an airport because I'm stuck somewhere. And then normally at the end of retirement, we spend a little bit more again. So it increases again, which is like the curvature of a smile, right? I spend a lot, I spend less in the middle, I spend a lot at the end. So that's the smile. That is going to be what we find to be the spending patterns for most people. I like the inflation adjusted just as a like, hey, I'm worried. Is this plan really going to work, Dre? And I'm like, look, let's just assume you're literally going to keep spending more every single year. And then we'll see what that looks like. I'll come there and I'll change that at the end for you. So you don't have to worry about that. When we're talking about the tax strategy and the different things, the main thing that we did, and we'll go here to the tax tables and I'll show you real quick. So for this plan, we did do Roth conversions. It ended up making more sense for them. And so I think we ultimately ended up having to make a big change. So I will show you the change that we did. With them retiring in like 5 or 6 years, there's not a lot of Roth conversions that you can do as far as the time that you can move it over between when you're spending and you're doing your lifestyle. That's part of the reason why for this particular one, we ended up recommending for them that we just kept working a little bit longer. That was why we went over a lot of the case study idea of if you're in the nonprofit sector, that is one of your advantages is that the job is generally speaking, right, a little bit less demanding. And then the longer that you work, the less money you have to spend out of your investments and the more time that you have to fund the investments. So it ends up being a double win for you. And so for this particular plan, let me show you what we ended up doing and then we'll go through everything. So for them, and you don't have to go all the way, but I was like, look, retiring at 63, let's not do that. What if we waited till the full retirement age? Just give me 4 more years. So we're gonna say 63, just give me 4 more years, right? It sounds like a presidential call, right? 4 more years. No, right. We're just talking about retirement and we're talking about work. If the work gives you the balance that you need, you don't mind working 4 years of not withdrawing from your investments, and then 4 years of contributing more. So you're contributing more into your Roth account. You gave yourself more years to do Roth conversions, and then you give yourself more years to increase your investment account. That is what made the most sense when we had a combined 200 and I think it was $10,000 that was sitting in their investments, and then the other one, so it was like 400,000 total, 300,000 total. It made more sense for them to keep working and to increase that amount. And so what you'll see here is if you give yourself 4 more years, drum roll, look at that. Goes up to an 88% probability of success just by working those additional 4 years. Now, we already talked about why that is so beneficial if that is a lever that you have. Now, if you already have the money that's sitting in the account, then sure, retiring early, why not? But at a minimum, we probably would need to wait at least until 65 because what happens? If you go early, then you have to cover your healthcare expenses. So that's more expenses that you have. And that could be, for a couple, that could be like $800 a month for those years. That's an expense that maybe if we just work to 65 and then we get Medicare, we don't have to worry about it. But then also now we don't have to take Social Security early. So now we're able to wait and we can get our full Social Security instead of waiting until 70. It's up to you as far as how to maximize it. But now we have our Medicare and our Social Security, both are in a much better position. And then we have more money in our investments. And now we start spending from it and it works in a much more favorable situation. So let's go through what the changes are. All right, so you can see that we did change the allocation, as I mentioned, to a more moderate approach. They were relatively aggressive. Social Security full retirement age, so that's 67 for both of them. And then when you go to the tax strategy, we have 4 more years of working, which give us the ability to do a few more Roth conversions. You can see all of a sudden now we're able to lower your taxes by 6 figures over your retirement, and now you have closer to $2 million that you don't have to withdraw because of required minimum distributions, where you have to start taking the money out after 73. We also have about close to $1 million more in tax adjusted ending assets. So you can see that just having those 4 extra years, put the plan in place. We're like 67 and 60 or 57 now. You give us 10 years, we can do the Roth conversions over 10 years. You don't have to take the money out. We wait till Medicare, wait on Social Security, keep working. You're in a position where in nonprofits, right, we don't get paid as much as our private sector partner, but we do have the ability to generally work a little bit longer because the demands are generally a little bit less. Again, there's always exceptions. We're just simply saying, generally speaking, the demands are a little bit less, so I can work that into my plan. And so for them, you can see that ends up changing it for us. So what do we end up doing with the debt? Well, with a little bit of extra time that we can work now, we can focus on paying off the debt. And we just worked from the lowest balance to the highest. Paid off the car first, then we worked on the mortgage. We did not increase the amount that we paid in any way. We just paid off simply where we put any extra money that we have towards the car. And then we went to the mortgage, and you can see that it helped us to pay off the bills 28 months sooner. And so about 2 years sooner. And then we saved about $10,000 in interest. We had pretty good interest rates on both of them. So we didn't save as much as interest. But now that debt is gone. So we're able to get rid of that debt at 59 now. We're able to, so we're in, 2 years earlier. So it's not 59, it's actually in 37. Sorry. No. That was what it was. Yeah, it's actually in 35. It's actually in 35. So both our house and our cars will be paid off by the time that we retire if we wait until the 67, which is a large also benefit that we have is when you have the extra money and you're not retiring, where we're not paying out in healthcare with the trying to cover the gap between Medicare. We also don't have to take Social Security early, so we have that gap that we're covering, and then we can get rid of our debt. Now, when we retire, we have no debt. We have Medicare started. We have Social Security at our full retirement amount. So we don't have the 70 with the maximum amount, but we have the 67, our full retirement amount. And when you put those pieces together over a 10-year span, intentional with your money, even though we're just doing 5% with a 5% match, that's all we need. So we put the 5% in, we get the 5% match, and then we're able to get rid of the debt. We don't have to take our withdrawals early. And you can see how it ends up working for this plan. We went from retired 2019. What is that? He's just right. What is considered a modest income? Well, right. It probably depends on the type of work that we're doing. But normally, what I'm talking about is just the counterpart. That if I am a accountant in a nonprofit, I'm generally paid less than an accountant for the Big Four. That if I am a doctor at a nonprofit, I'm generally paid less than a doctor that has their own private practice. That's what I'm talking about. Not necessarily the number. I'm just saying what you could get paid in the economy for your work compared to someone working in the public versus the private sector, right? If you are in the military versus a hired private security for a CEO, if you work, even if you work at was it Blackwater was the private military that we had back during the Iraq War, where Blackwater, I think that's who it was, where if you're retired military private security and like mercenary work, they get paid a lot more than they did when they served in the public sector. So that's what I'm talking about when I say that it's a modest income comparatively. Excellent question, my friend. Retired 2019. Right. So you can see, and for this particular plan, all we needed to do was really to keep working until everything was paid off. Paid off the house, paid off the car. Now we can still fund the daughter's wedding. We can give her the money. We can still fund our trips. We can still give to the nonprofit. We're able to accomplish all of their retirement dreams. The difference was we needed to continue working so that we can get all the rest of the pieces in place, which is also comparatively, if you were in a position where you're in your early 50s and you've basically checked off all these boxes, the only thing that you really would need to do, like if I was someone in my 50s, I paid off my debt, my house is gone, and I have a decent amount of money that's saved up for my retirement income, I would focus on just putting as much as I can into my health savings account, because you're going to use that money to fund your healthcare expenses while you wait until you get to 65 for Medicare and to be able to take advantage of that. Like that would be the approach that I would take. As far as the sanity check, one thing that we often will like to do is we normally look at a couple things. So one is, as we'll look at what our overall savings rate is. We have the 5% that's going into your 403b, and then you have your maxing out your Roth account. We're contributing about 20% of our income, which is going to be a pretty good situation to be in. It gives us the ability to be able to save. The way that you think of 20% is you're paying yourself first. So if you work 5 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, everything that you make on Monday, that money goes to you. You're going to invest that for your freedom, for your retirement. And then the other 4 days you can use on your bills and everything in the present. That would be the ideal situation that we would work towards. Like that's where you like to be able to pay yourself first. So every Monday when you go to work, you should be thinking, this is money for me. This is what I'm paying myself so that I can use this money to leverage into my multiple streams of income, because the numbers say that 65% of self-made millionaires have at least 3 streams of income. And so you need to have some sort of money that you can then invest in those other assets. And those other asset classes are normally going to be your own business, the real estate market, or the stock market. Now, some people will do commodities, and we can put like crypto and other things in there, like gold and silver and other precious metals. Those all would go in commodities. That could be a fourth bucket. But for most people, it's going to be real estate, stock market, your own personal business. So you take your earned income and then you invest it in those other ones and you create those additional streams that you would be looking for. Okay. So then the last thing that we look at is we will do like a stress test. And so normally when we're looking at the stress test, what we're saying is it going to say, okay. What we're saying is, all right, I have an 88% probability of success. What happens if the market drops? What do you mean by the market drops? It means it drops by 20% when you first retire. Well, I'm still over 80%. I feel good. We're really looking for anything that goes below 70%. And then that's where we would look at ways to adjust our plan to make sure that we don't run out of money. And so then when you look at taxes, it says what happens if your taxes are increased by 20%? We're still okay because we did a decent amount of Roth conversion. So we're not worried about taxes anymore because that money is already paid taxes on and it's sitting in a tax-free account. If you had a stress test that said if taxes went up by 20%, your retirement would drop below the number that we will be looking for, above 70%, then that means that we have a lot of money that's sitting in a tax-deferred account that we haven't paid taxes on. And if taxes are increased, then we have to take out more money because you have to cover your lifestyle, but you also have to cover your taxes. And so if we were to take out $10,000 a month, well, that would then be like, let's say it was taxed at 30%. Well, that means I would only get to keep 700 of it and then 7,000 of it. And then 3,000 would go towards my taxes. So if we're able to already pay taxes now and spread that out leading into retirement, we're able to protect ourselves. And that's what we did here. Social Security, because that is a decent amount of both of their accounts because of the way we had everything set up, that is the one that is the riskiest for them. And it's what if Social Security is reduced by 20%? And with the numbers on Social Security, that is a concern that will be very viable, much to consider. And then we would have to be thinking, how do I become less dependent on Social Security? And then inflation was the other one, puts us just below the 70. And then if our asset return, that puts this also as well. So we're saying the assets will be lowered by 1% every single year. So that compounds. If inflation is the same idea, if that lowers by 1% every single year, and then that compounds too. And you can see how compounding will impact us the most because it is something that does happen all the time on a regular basis. All right, on that, my friends, if you are interested, I always have the option for you to come to our Worry-Free Wednesday. Every single Wednesday, we meet and we go over the 5 hidden dangers to a wealthy retirement. And we go over 3 strategies that you can implement today that I share with my private clients to make sure that you do not run out of money. And so it's live every single week. I am there. All you have to do is go to obsidianwisdom.com. You click that I want a worry-free retirement button. It'll take you here where you then sign up. And then from there, you'll be registered and then you'll be able to see the Zoom link. It's to the first 100. So just so you know and have a heads up on that. As always, I'm thankful for the time that we have together and I appreciate you being here with me. Could have been anywhere. And then next Thursday, we'll get together again for another Retirement Readiness Thursday. As always, I'm thankful for our time. Until next time, stay safe and enjoy life.